Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the workshop for the first time. So with this video it's actually a tool tip, and the reason I'm doing this is because I've had loads and loads of messages from people asking me basically would I recommend the wood turning lathe that I use, because it's more of a sort of budget lathe. So I thought I'd take a few minutes just to talk you through it and explain the certain little extra bits that I've added to it to get it to work better. So this is the lathe in question, guys. It's the Clarke Woodworker CWL1000B. With this actually came, it was £160 in England when I bought it. So it comes with the lathe. It doesn't come with this chuck, it actually comes with a more basic, just a spiked spindle that you attach here onto the normal spindle. And it also comes with this backing plate, which is a really great tool. This part I used a lot, basically for making the things that I use it for, so mainly wands. I would do this, so I would have a piece of wood that I've cut. I would then screw it onto there and then put the piece of wood, sometimes having to jam it into the middle, and that would wouldn't be perfectly level and straight, but it would be quite a nice base for this to work on. That worked quite well up until the last 2 or 3 ones that I've made, in which case then I bought this, which is much easier to get central to the tailstock there. It also comes with the work rest, and then also with these 3 chisels, which when I first did my actual first video using this, which was a bowl making video, I was actually I was advised by someone in the comments to get different chisels, and they're definitely right, but I just can't get them at this very second. But these 3 chisels I've had to sharpen a lot, so yeah, they go blunt very quickly. That's one thing to watch out with this. If you're looking at it for budget, then by all means, yes, the lathe, but I would definitely recommend budgeting to get better chisels than the ones that it comes with. But other than that, what I'll do is I'll start off with the good points. So with this, it's relatively robust. I've put, as I say, larger parts in this. The bowl, which was a big chunk of wood, probably about 9 or 10 inches square, and it did it absolutely fine. There was no problem with that. You just have to turn the speeds using the belt to a different sort of speed when you're using larger parts. The tailstock is pretty, once it's clamped in using the bolt down there, it's very sturdy. This is probably the standout part, so the actual tool rest underneath, all you have to do is undo that bar. You can then move the tool rest back and forwards wherever you need it. I know it's the same on all lathes, but for this cheaper lathe, it's definitely one of the standout sort of parts of it. I would like, and I'm going to in the future, I'm going to make smaller versions of this, because sometimes you'll have a piece of work on the lathe and you need to get in close to it, but because this is so long, nearly the entire length of the lathe, you can't get it close enough without the tool basically juddering, and it messes the work up. So what I'm going to do, because this, if I undo it, it's just a piece of round bar, I'm going to get some bits of round bar, weld on parts, and then just make some very short pieces that I can basically get closer to the work in future. But other than that, that's a very good part of the actual lathe. Everything bolts on tightly, like I said. That really tightens everything very sturdily. This, I've never had the tailstock bolts come undone. In general, it is strong. I wouldn't say bad points, they're just things that you just have to take into account, really. It's different things like this, where this bed is steel box section. It is going to be nowhere near as sturdy as, say, a solid cast lathe bed, and the same for the tailstock as well. So this, one of the main things I would say is when you bolt it down, so here I've screwed it down, when you bolt it down to a table or a workbench, I would really make sure that you don't have this too tight, because then it will start to do that, and then the distance, sorry, the sort of line between the headstock and the tailstock will start to be curved one way or the other, and you want it to be absolutely straight across, because these are pretty flexible even though they're steel bars. I also I also wouldn't particularly want to go any bigger than the way this is set up. So this actually came with an extra extension, so it looks exactly the same as this, is actually just there. It's an extension where you can just bolt it on, and it makes it basically turns it into a double length lathe where you could make huge fence posts, I suppose, if you wanted to, or become a pole turner for making spears. But I wouldn't particularly like to use too large a piece of wood on that myself, because I wouldn't have thought it'd be sturdy enough for that. It would flex quite a bit. You'd have to reinforce it in some way, I would say. With this as well, this isn't a problem with the lathe, this is a problem with me. So with this, basically using the spindle and the backing plate, they're lovely lightweight parts, it's absolutely fine. But when I upgraded to this chuck, it's very heavy. It's probably at least 3 kilos, so what's that, 7.5 pounds. And it's quite a big item for the lathe, for the smaller motor in the lathe to actually turn. And I found when I first installed it, I was turning it on, you could hear the motor was literally spinning the belts in here. With this, you have to back off these 2 screws to actually open this, so it's normally completely closed. But yeah, the motor was spinning, and it was just destroying the belt. So with this, it was my fault. I had it way too tight, and I just had to research online and found the perfect sort of setup. So it's basically, you want it so it's actually quite loose, and this tightens when it initially spins. This tightens, and that actually goes quite loose, and that's the way you want it to be set up. So that's one of the things I would say. If you do have trouble with the belt spinning, it's normally that you haven't actually set up the belt properly. Or if you upgrade to a Chinese chuck like this, I would say exactly the same. Don't want to dwell on the bad parts, because it's actually very good. But another thing, I've also had to replace this switch here. That went bad. The connectors in the back went bad, probably only, I would say, 30 hours into use, something like that. But they're relatively cheap as well. You can find them online. And also, the main tip I would say for this is that when you tighten the tailstock, it looks absolutely fine. It's 90 degrees to the bed. But then when you start to tighten the actual spindle at the back, it as it tightens the work between the chuck and the tailstock spindle there, this starts to move back. It starts to actually squeeze, and then you end up with a part that, instead of just spinning nicely, it does that as it spins. And it's very frustrating when you're at the end of something and you've got it nice and thin, like say like a wand, and it suddenly snaps because it's spinning. So what I found was basically, this is this is going to sound very bodged, but it's something that I've found works really well. So here you can see I've just got pieces of old hacksaw blade, and I just chopped those, sanded them nice and smooth, and I just put those in here, just behind the, just underneath, literally 5mm or 1/8 of an inch, just in underneath. And when you tighten this down, it tightens nicely, and when you actually start tightening the tailstock against the piece of wood in the lathe, it'll obviously still squeeze back a bit, but it actually ends up squeezing it then back to 90 rather than past it, and you end up with the piece of wood staying much smoother in the actual lathe itself. So that's probably the biggest tip, is even though it looks bodged, is to just put 2 little slithers of metal in there, just to make sure it doesn't bend the actual wood you're lathing out of shape. Another thing which you can't buy, but I would like to make myself, is actually a chuck guard. So I'd like to make out of sheet steel, similar to the casing, up over here and then down, connected to the box section, just so that when it's spinning you can only see just the actual work poking out of there, because it's pretty nasty, the thought of getting your fingers caught in there. So that's something which, like I say, it's not everyone would feel the need for it, but I personally would very much like to actually get one made for myself there. But overall, as for the actual the question that people have had, which is would I recommend buying it? I would. Yes, it's worked absolutely great for me. The only thing I would say straight away is to do that. So put the little slithers of metal. It will make the work much straighter. And if there is anything that you want to be really precise, I would definitely say to buy this chuck, which, like I say, the actual lathe itself was about £160. The chuck was about £50 or £60, which is quite steep, but it's for finer work. I would definitely recommend it. And overall, I would say that the lathe, I have personally no need to buy anything more advanced, so I would definitely recommend it to the people that have sent me those questions. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching the video. Hope you found it instructional and helpful. And please like, comment and subscribe for more. Thank you.